All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first webinar of the year, Turning Your ICP into a Growth Driver. As many of you have heard or seen on LinkedIn, the old playbook is dead, right? But now what? Well, we at Inverta have tackled the question with our new revenue marketing playbook. If you haven't seen it, we will send a link to it in our follow-up to today's session. But suffice it to say, the reason the old playbook is dead is that it didn't evolve to meet the needs, to meet the new buyer's journey. It's even more online than before, which means marketers, not sales, are responsible for building a company's reputation in the industry, establishing trust with your prospects, and developing relationships that will ensure that your company is on the short list when a prospect is ready to buy a solution. It's a lot for sure. Well, we want to make sure you start off on the right foot. So to ensure that you're set up for success and can utilize your resources as efficiently and effectively as possible, you want to start with a rock solid ICP to drive your go-to-market motion. Today, we've invited our friends at Align ICP and Intelex to help us tell the story of what good looks like when it comes to building and operationalizing an ICP within your organization. So a few quick things before we get into it. One, we will be leaving time at the end of today's session for Q&A. So please add your questions during the presentation to the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We will also be sending out the recording and the slides following today's session. So please check your inboxes tomorrow and feel free to share with your teams. So with that, I would like to introduce today's presenters. First, we have Kathy Mackey, EVP of Innovation and co-founder of Inverta. Kelly Santos, VP of Lifecycle Marketing and Business Development at Intelex Technologies. And last but certainly not least, we're joined by Bob Garcia, founding CMO of Aligned ICP. So with that, that's enough for me until we get to the Q&A. So for now, I'm going to turn it on over to Kathy to kick us off.
Yes, thank you very much. And so one of the questions I get asked is, so why an ICP? And essentially it's because not all customers are created equal. And if you're in B2B SaaS, it is really expensive chasing accounts that are not going to turn into long-term customers for you. And when you nail your ICP, this is when you get sales and marketing pulling the same direction. You're not focusing budget and resource on accounts that aren't going to convert or basically aren't going to even stick around. And it's not just about efficiency, it's about growth. And so a data-driven ICP not only helps you close deals, but helps you retain and expand them. And it points you towards really high value accounts. And so in other words, it's the kind of customers you can actually grow your business on. If you go to the next slide. Basically, a lot of times what I see happen is everyone thinks, oh, I can get my ICP done and it's going to happen in one meeting at an offsite. We're going to come up with all the things and we're going to have it. Or you get your data scientists to run some analysis on a Friday afternoon. And it's not a one and done. Essentially what it is, it's a journey. And most people start on the left-hand side. And it's a basic spot, but it's fine. It's usually 100% firmographics. It could be North America, how much revenue are you looking for? And that's fine, to be honest. It's a good place to start, but it's not an ICP, it's a filter. And then you might inch along and you start adding more attributes. And again, that's smarter, it's better. But again, it's probably a lot of guessing, a lot of intuition, and it's being driven by sales anecdotal feedback. And then eventually you get to account scoring. And that's going to help you prioritize accounts around engagement or likelihood to convert. But again, that's going to focus on accounts more likely to buy, which is not a bad thing, but way ahead. But it's really about finding accounts that are more likely to grow and expand with you. And then the magic happens when you get to the data modeling. This is where you start asking questions about what accounts have the highest NRR, which ones are really driving most of my retention, who's going to expand with me. And when you get that, those are your attributes for sustainable, profitable growth. And when that overlaps with your customer needs and your solutions, that's your true ICP, and that's what you want to really shoot for. Bob, if you go to the next slide. Because, and I should say, slap your forehead if you've heard this in a meeting. Well, technically, everyone could use our product. And while that may be true, they don't necessarily should be your customers. And this is sort of what happens when what would I call it? The everyone mindset runs the show. Like on the left-hand side, 75% of your net new logos came from deals less than 50K, less than 45K. That's a lot of work without a lot of payoff. And it brought in less than $1 million in revenue. And so you have to think, like, I bet you spent more between sales, marketing, onboarding, and CS than you ever got back on that deal. And so what happens is your focus is missing. You're chasing anyone that has a pulse, as opposed to what happens is your real profitable customers don't get the attention they deserve. And then Bob, on the next slide is another case of what I call good intentions, but without a clear data-driven ICP, you get painful outcomes. And you look at this, wow, retail's making up 25% of our net new logos. And it looks promising. We're getting a lot of traction. But the flip side, the catch is they're accounting for most of our churn. And so that's just not a leaky bucket. That's like a flood. And again, just because a segment's easy to acquire doesn't mean they're the right customers for you. And so an ICP is not just about targeting, it's really a focus strategy. It lets you as a company start to commit the people, the budget, the resources to focus on accounts that are more likely to grow and really drive NRR for you. And if you go to the next slide, Bob, and what happens when you don't have one? A lot of times what you'll see is your campaigns are flat, your pipeline's bloated with accounts that aren't really closing, or your team is really busy, but they're not getting anywhere. Because what we found is about 65% of the success of your campaigns is coming from choosing the right audience, not the copy, not the creative, the audience. And when you don't have the right audience, you have inefficient resource allocation. It means, sales and marketing have different priorities. You have a churn problem, and that CS feels at first when they're dealing with these customers that are never going to use your product well. Or you get missed revenue opportunities. You're spending too much time on accounts that are never going to close. And again, you're not giving the ones that are going to grow with you the right amount of attention. Sales and marketing could be working on totally different lists because their systems are surfacing the different data points, and it all turns into a negative financial impact. So the good news is this is all fixable. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica and Kelly to talk about that.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Kathy, for that kind of foundational level setting for us. So I'm going to actually invite Kelly to join me in a bit of a conversation here to really talk about, from Intelex's perspective, why did they go the route of an ICP? What kind of triggered it for them? What was happening inside of their business that made them come to the conclusion that, hey, it's actually time for us to really seriously take a look at an ICP. So Kelly, why don't you answer kind of that first question for us? Why did you go there? What happened?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jessica. So it was exactly what Kathy had mentioned. We were a lot of things to a lot of different people, and we knew that we wanted to protect our customer base. We wanted to serve them as best as possible. And so we knew we really needed to focus and understand, well, which types of customers do we win, but also which ones will stay with us and grow with us, and that we can continue to serve really, really well. So we had two stages of our ICP. The latter stage I'll talk about later on within the segment. But the first one is we really focused on win rate. And it was great that we were able to understand, well, who are the folks that we want to bring into our business, that we have the most success in going after and are a really good fit for our product. And so that was really our first kind of trigger is we know we need to be more focused. Our team wants to have kind of those boundaries around which ones are going to bring the most success to us, and we can bring the most success to them. So that was the initial trigger is let's focus our teams a little bit more with the right products that we're putting together, the right products that we continue to invest in, and make sure we're serving our customer base as best as possible.
Excellent. And so with that kind of guiding principle, how did you go about actually developing your ICP kind of this first go around?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a lot of data analysis, and really we looked at every piece of data that you can really look at, but we really focused on win rate. So the beginning stage of kind of that whole customer journey. We looked at which types of industries, companies, revenue. What Kathy had mentioned kind of in the beginning of that slide is really just that filter. We looked at that first to say, what are the qualities of the types of customers that will benefit from Intelex Technologies products? When we looked at that, then we said, okay, well, where do we win the most? And so that was really our initial foray into an ICP. And what was really exciting too is that ICP, it was fairly new to the organization and it promised a lot of focus for the team. So not only would our ICP help us focus our sales energy, but also it would influence the type of content that we put out. It would influence how we engage with certain folks and how we understand their buyer journey as well. So it would essentially change our go-to-market motion.
Amazing. Yeah, sounds like data's at the crux of it for sure.
Nice.
So anybody who's allergic to data, get over it. You need it for a good ICP. You had mentioned that ICP was something that was new to Intelex. So what was the reception like around kind of this process? And, obviously you were going to be asking people to change their behavior based on this ICP experience. So how was that received within your organization, within marketing, sales, even product, right?
Yeah, for marketing, it's a pretty well-received concept. We know that from an audience perspective, with a lot of the campaigns that we pull together in tactics, we always have to define our audience and our personas. I would say the reception was good in theory. So yes, we know we need to move to an ICP. We want to focus our efforts. Where it's a bit of an art and a science too is we were very data driven, which is great, but we're also listening or wanted to listen to more of the boots on the ground. So from a sales perspective, what are you hearing? What are you experiencing? We have a lot of opportunities that also come in that fall out of our ICP. So now what? Do we disregard those folks? And so it actually brought up a lot of questions for the team too, is if we move to this ICP, then what? What does that mean? Do we start to say no? So I think there was a bit of healthy concern around, okay, we bring in this concept of focus, great, thumbs up, we love it. But what does that mean for the folks that fall out of that ICP? So definitely anchored onto the idea of it, but there was a lot of questioning, which I think is really good. And it's really healthy to understand where do we focus and where don't we?
Yeah. Yeah, and that alignment sometimes is where some organizations can certainly get tripped up, right? And to your point, making it an art and a science, I think is really
Yes,
important because you got to listen to your counterparts, right, in those other teams to make sure that they're feeling heard because then they'll be bought in
for
to a
sure.
new process like this. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for setting that stage, Kelly. As you mentioned, we're going to bring you back a little bit later in today's webinar, but now I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to Bob for our next segment.
Awesome. Great, great insights, Kelly, just in terms of the journey, and Jessica and Kathy, just on really highlighting the fact that building an ICP, developing an ICP is really a strategic focus, enabling, tool for a company. So what we've seen just in our years of marketing is the best go-to-market teams don't just have an ICP, they actually use it for all their decision making. And it's really a system and not a slide. It really helps enable, decision making and accelerating decision making. It creates efficiencies in terms of go-to-market. It helps to drive cross-functional alignment. And it really helps you build a unified understanding of who your target accounts are and how to focus your resources against those. So all in all, it provides a lot of value to your organization. In terms of ICPs and why they matter, one side of the business, CFOs, CEOs, CS, your board, they obsess about renewal rates, your net retention revenue, and your customer lifetime value. Sales and marketing, however, as Kelly mentioned, we look at win rates, average selling price, and sales cycles and look to drive efficiencies in optimizing those. The real key to unpacking an ICP that's data-driven is you need to consider both metrics, both sets of metrics, both sales and financial revenue metrics to really unlock, a lot more value for your organization, creating better and smarter, go-to-market alignment, which drives company valuation. In terms of how we go about, constructing an ICP for our clients, and it's not just one, it's actually ICP segments. We look to their data stores. Typically, it's a CRM. Sometimes it could be the billing system. We look at data enrichment, and we start to bring in all that data that's customer related, and we process it, we normalize it, we create standard taxonomies, we start to develop financial metrics at an account and segment level. which we then use to discover ICPs through machine learning models. And if you look at this example, we started out with about 80,000 accounts in your CRM. We reduced that down to just 1,000 customer accounts. And if we look at who's in ICP, it could be anywhere from 15 to 30% of your customer base probably is within your ideal customer profile segments. And then we go and look at who's in your CRM that's not yet a customer, a prospect, who's outside of your CRM that we could add to your target, your target account list. And we start to consolidate those opportunities to create focus and an understanding for who to look for intent signals from. So with intent, it's typically between 5 to 20% of your market is in market, and you need to act and behave differently with those accounts than you do with accounts that are not in market. So by applying intent signals to those target prospects and customers, you're really able to understand and focus your marketing and your sales teams on execution. So this is kind of a high-level schematic of a reductive and expansive and reductive process to really come up with your total, your target account list for, account-based marketing and go-to-market overall. And what this really enables is more efficient and intentional, demand creation activities and brand building efforts, because you could focus your primary investments in your ICPs. And we're not saying it's an all or nothing activity, but it allows you to prioritize and be intentional about how you spend. Everybody's being asked to do more with less, and you're challenged with making decisions on where to spend money, what events to go to, and who to invest in trying to get the attention of to create that brand awareness that's so important for today's buying, processes. And with that, you're able to then focus your demand capture activities by doubling down on those accounts that really are the most important to your business, that are in the purchase process, that you really need to get in front of and influence. And the reality is, if you don't do this type of work, your customer acquisition costs are going to be out of whack. They're going to be, increasing. It's just becoming more expensive to, get on the radar of people, and you need to be much more intentional about how you do that. To help, create some structure and shared understanding and help, companies diagnose their gaps in their ICP strategy, we've invested some time and energy in thinking around an ICP segmentation maturity model. We've got a great resource that's going to be linked to you from this presentation and from the follow-up that Jessica sends out that speaks to a 4-tier structure of ICP maturity. The first one is simple. It's basically what Kathy was speaking to earlier, in that a lot of it's intuition based. Company size, revenue band is really maybe the primary indicator of segmentation. If you go to the next level, foundational, you start to move beyond that, start to look at other attributes, start to look at verticals, start to look at, sales segments, start to consider things more strategically. Revenue operations oftentimes starts to get involved in that process. And the third stage, which is really a more advanced stage, starts to look at average contract value, days to close, win rates. It's like really what Intelex was leaning into and doing a great job of when we started working with them. ICPs are refined, but there's still some different opinions within sales and marketing, because you don't have the complete set of data to look at that struggles to align teams. The final stage is a strategic point where you're layering in lifetime value. You're layering in, net revenue retention, GRR, logo retention, NPS, and other factors to really contribute to the discovery and definition of who your best performing ICP segments are. So I won't go any deeper into this, but there's definitely a longer form article you could read on Inverta's blog that will help you unpack these different levels. And now back over to Jessica and Kelly.
Oh, actually, Bob, I believe
Actually, these were my questions for Kelly, since we did the work with them. Skip that step. So, hey, Kelly, here's what you learned. You provided us a great summary. What was the key takeaway from your first go around at ICP work that drove you to wanting to get into a more data-driven, lifetime value-powered ICP kind of analysis?
Absolutely. And I think the slide that you just showed too was such a good way to look at even our own journey. So from the first go around, we learned, win rate is a great start. We had a great jump off point from where we ultimately wanted to go within our maturity journey to move into more of that strategic column. We also want to make sure, again, we're bringing these folks in, but how do we retain them and how do we expand with them? So we wanted to make sure that we protected our customer base, right? We were serving the right people, putting our energy in the right spots, making sure that we kept our customer acquisition costs down. We were just being really smart with our energy and our dollars and what we're able to do. And so as a best practice, looking at our ICP every year, 18, maybe 24 months is really just something we continue to do is as our environments change, our buyer behavior changes, our products change, we want to make sure that we're also modifying our ICP along with it. And so that's really what prompted us to say, okay, let's pause for a moment, take a peek at what we're doing, and then see where we might continue to refine it. And we knew that we had to add some of those other metrics to just make our ICP much more refined over time.
You brought up a great point about retention. So you're increasing your focus in marketing on retention activities?
That's exactly right. Yes. So making sure that we keep those folks, we have them become customer champions, customer advocates, that they're helping to speak on our behalf and speaking to peers and really doing so much, but making sure that we're keeping them really happy with the products that we offer them and that they're using our services and using our products and driving the outcomes that ultimately they need to see within their organization. And if you step back from even just that retention space, it starts in the beginning. It starts with marketing. It starts with the first touch from sales. It's delivering that value at each point, making sure that we know as we bring these customers on board, the outcomes that they're able to drive, and we can start to communicate those at the marketing and sales touch points. And it's really important to know within what our ICPs are so that we can tailor that messaging very appropriately at each stage of the buyer's journey.
That's awesome. That just shows a lot of maturity and wisdom in terms of focusing on life cycle marketing, not just acquisition.
Absolutely.
In terms of who was involved in the process? Was this kind of marketing going off and doing its thing, or were you pulling in other team members?
Yeah, so this was a foundational exercise as part of bringing in ABM. So you talked a little bit about changing your go-to-market motion, focusing on ABM. We knew that in order to really have a strong ABM program, we needed to look at our ICP again. But we also know with ABM, we need a lot of stakeholder buy-in. And so we brought sales into the conversation. They were in the conversation early, and they were pretty familiar from our first getting our feet wet with ICP last year or in 2023. They were familiar with the process, but we also brought in AEs, especially folks that had long tenure, folks that have done really well to get their feedback. And that's where that art and science comes in. And so we involved a lot of different folks to make sure that they were heard, that they brought their feedback to the table, they understood the data, and they also understood what it was that we're measuring. So yes, we have win rate, but we're also looking at, can we retain them? Will they stay with us? Will they expand with us? What is their ultimate lifetime value? And that's a great message for sales, is to say, we want to bring these folks in, but we also want to make sure that your energy is going into the right spot. So not only do we work with the net new team to bring them in, but we also worked with the client sales team that was very excited to know that we were also looking at expansion metrics as well.
That's awesome. It sounds like it's having a kind of a holistic, transformative impact on your business and go to market. Is that a fair statement?
It is, yes. So with the introduction of, or continuing to work on our ICP, the introduction of ABX, this has fundamentally changed our go-to-market motion. So we're very account first driven now. We're also really able to just align the two teams and collaborate more effectively. We're all speaking the same language now when it comes to target accounts and ICP and ABX. So we're all in lockstep together to know exactly what it is that we're trying to achieve with the introduction of ICP and ABX as well.
Awesome, awesome. So do you see this as being kind of, now you've got the answer, or this is the start of a journey?
It's definitely the start of a journey. Kathy had mentioned it earlier too, it is a journey. I think a journey is almost never ending, and you continue to refine your go-to-market, continue to refine your ICP. We will certainly continue to have a lot of learnings. as we bring in ABX and marketing qualified accounts, even the way that we measure what we're doing is different as well. So the journey is certainly going to continue into the foreseeable future. And then we'll iterate over time on our ICP and what our go-to-market looks like.
That's awesome. So and it sounds like this is really serving as a North Star for your business.
Absolutely. Yes. Being able to focus on really the folks that we're able to win with from first acquisition through advocacy is really paramount for, I think, for any organization, especially for SaaS, when you consider any kind of a subscription model or customers that you really want to make sure you retain over time. I think it's really important to have that focus of who are the folks that we're going after, that we're going to see improved velocity, higher deal size. And like you said earlier too, Bob, it was really driving that connection to not just let's bring in these particular accounts, but let's also tie it to the business outcomes that we're trying to drive for Intelex that speak to the C-suite and the things that are most important to them when it comes to retention, renewal, lifetime value.
Oh, and in terms of any surprises along the journey, any kind of, things that, caught you by surprise?
Yes, have good surprises. I think an output that we hadn't set out as a goal for this exercise, but that was really tremendously beneficial, is the alignment between sales and marketing. It opened up a lot of those communication channels. It allowed us to have just really honest, open conversations about what is our ICP, what has it been in the past, where are we winning, where are we losing, where do we want to focus, making sure product is also involved in those conversations as well, because if we're not building the right products to serve our ICPs, it's kind of moot. So it opened those channels for sure. And then, like I said, with ABX, it's continuing that conversation and moving us to more of an account first go-to-market motion. So, you traditionally hear sales and marketing, sometimes misaligned, we work in silos, and it's really benefited bringing us much more closely together into who we go after, but also how we measure our success.
That's amazing. So it sounds like, the involvement of cross-functional partners, sales in particular, the use and application of data, and then the surfacing of that data were really great enabling kind of facts to really drive alignment. Is that a fair summary?
100%. Yes. And, no data is perfect. And so we really operated under the pretense of just progress over perfection, because we know data can be tough. But yes, having that group and relying heavily on data, machine learning to help with aggregate and examine a lot of that data was also really important.
Awesome. And is this the kind of thing you think you could do in-house? You need some help externally from this wonderful group of folks at Inverta.
The help was very needed.
Awesome.
And very appreciated.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you, Kelly, for all those great insights. Really appreciate you sharing your story with everybody, because I think there is a lot to unpack there around this notion of driving alignment through data. Because, I've worked for a lot of different organizations that have really struggled, and a lot of people bring their opinions to the table, but it seems like data is the great neutralizer and unifier for developing, an aligned go-to-market organization. With that, let me hand it over to Kathy and Jessica.
You're just going to name everyone so you don't have to worry, Bob. One of them. I appreciate it. Yeah, so let me talk about, because we've done this a lot, work with Bob, work with Kelly, there's like some common pitfalls. And the first time I put sort of in the foundational category, like it's sitting in your ICP, sitting in slides, and it's not operationalized. It's not in your CRM. It's not in your marketing automation system. So you just can't act on it. The second one is I've seen sales and marketing work in totally different systems. And so what gets surfaced in the map is not what's getting surfaced in the CRM or your ABM system. So this is for foundational. Then the next ones are what I call process. That you didn't socialize what was going on the whole time. So people just don't trust the data. They don't trust the process. There's no buy-in across it. It becomes shelfware. Or you get it all socialized, but you've left out your RevOps folks a bit. So they've already done territory planning. So that we have it's your territory planning does not sync up with your ICP, and you have accounts that have reps that are assigned accounts that aren't even your ICP. And the last one is, and I think Kelly, it's the one and done. Like markets move, product changes, things change, like it becomes outdated. It has to be a living, breathing strategy where it's evolving as you evolve. And the last three I talk about sort of, I don't know, strategic blind spots, where the first one is around win rates, which is actually a good place to start. Like we had done that for a long time, but it ignores like the long-term value ones, NRR, retention, expansion. The other one is like all customers are good customers, and that's not correct. Like some customers drive growth and some customers you lose money on, or they just don't stay. And so you're constantly trying to get net new in the door. And when you do that, you end up spending a lot of energy on those and you're missing your high potential accounts. And the last one's just lack of feedback, what we talked about. It has to evolve with your business. And if you're not really measuring it and there's no refinement based on performance, it can just get dated, and soon it's not very helpful to you at all. If you go to the next one. And so, like, how do you make this all happen? And it really does come down to your people and your data. And so the one thing I'll see is, it's just not a sales and marketing tool. It really is a company-wide initiative when you look at it that way. Or the other one I'll see is someone gets really excited about an ICP, like someone attending this webinar. I want to do it. And they get with their Salesforce admin and say, can you do it? Let me tell you, your Salesforce admin is probably your busiest person in the entire company. When we have projects that require Salesforce admins, I put in a ticket like 6 months ahead of time. So when I'm going to get in their queue. They're not data scientists. They don't really have financial acumen. And so that group doesn't always help. You need them, but you need a cross-functional team, a sales, marketing, executives, the revenue team. You need the finance team. The finance team is the one that understands the numbers and what they mean, especially when you start to get into SaaS models and what type of billing you do on that. Is it a consumption model? Is it a per seat model? You've got to bring that data in. And the other one you talked about, Kelly, was data. Like no one has good data, but how do you start to get some of that data in good shape so you can do this analysis? So this is definitely cross-functional. You need everyone's, I'd say, perspective, everyone's knowledge, and everyone's skills to make this happen. It's just not one person can pull this off. If you go to the next slide, and what I talked about here is it's not just a sales and marketing tool, it's a company-wide strategy, and it affects everyone. This is the eye chart. You can read it later. But essentially marketing, you're going to do a better job targeting and focusing and not wasting budget. For sales and XDRs, you know who to prioritize. You get just more efficient. You can personalize. Customer success, let them spend time on the accounts that are really going to stay with you. And instead of spending most of their time on accounts that they're trying to make work, but it's not a good fit for them. Revenue ops, better job forecasting, better job scoring. Product development. How about making features and changes to the product that will help the customers that are going to stick around, as opposed to spending a lot of time doing features that people aren't going to stay? And a big one is executive leadership and strategy. What markets do we want to double down on? What segments do we want to focus on? What partnerships do we want to prioritize? This should be driving, Bob, you talked about it, a lot of decisions within the company. And that just doesn't happen, but it affects everyone. It's just not for targeting. This is really a focused strategy. Where do we put our time and resources? And if you go to the last one, I just want to talk to you about what an ICP looks like, what happens when you're missing it, what impact it can have across your organization. But you'll know success when about 70% of all your wins should be in your ICP. It won't be 100%, but a good 70% should be in there. And how to do that is we work with Bob and team on this, is creating the anti-ICP. Like what segments do you want to avoid? You're going to lose money on them. So which ones to avoid? And also I look at this as your ICP is not like your healthcare plan in the US only, where, every year you have to decide your healthcare plan, then it's in place for a year. There's nothing you can do. You need to keep it relevant. Like I said, it should be someone's job to be always looking at that. So it's evolving. And last is that's how to keep it fresh. And then the other one is, how do you keep it relevant? What is that cadence you want in place? So one, quarterly reviews, looking at retention, looking at your customers, but also looking at adoption. Are all those 6 groups really adopting it? How do you start to look at what insights you're gathering? How is that being fed back into product, into sales, into marketing? And then really having performance dashboards on it. Are those the accounts really seeing engaging? Are they converting? Are they churning? Because when you do that, you finally move your ICP out of just being in a slide and actually something that can drive growth for you. So Jess, I'm going to turn it back to you now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kelly, Bob, and Kathy, for all of your insights and your expertise that you shared with everybody today. Really appreciate it. And I mean, I think, there's a lot to ICPs, and I think people really need to understand kind of all the nuances, and it's not a snap of the fingers, easy thing to do. That being said, the juice is worth the squeeze on this one, right? Spending the time on an ICP is just going to make everybody's life easier across your entire organization. So, and I think Kelly has attested to that from a real world example. And we've worked with a bunch of clients. I know Bob has as well, and the team over at Align ICP. Nobody ever regrets doing an ICP exercise. Like I think we
That's a
can
good way to put it, Jess.
I
Yeah.
think we can say that.
Yeah.
Excellent. So with that, we're going to move into our Q&A portion of today. We already have a few questions, but in case you forgot, at the very bottom of your screen, there's a little Q&A button. So feel free to put in any of your questions to our audience and to just stall for a minute so you guys can come up with your questions and enter them there. I just wanted to let you know about a few things, a few resources that'll be at your disposal after today. We will send them out in the follow-up email, so not to worry on that. But we launched, as I mentioned at the front, the revenue marketing playbook to help you as marketers really navigate the changing buyer's journey out there. And our chapter 1 is about the ICP, because if you don't have an ICP, the rest of it kind of doesn't matter, because it's not going to be as effective or efficient as you need it to be, based on your not infinite budget and headcount. You need to be thoughtful and focused, as Kelly, the word focus Kelly used a couple times. You need that focus, and the ICP provides that. So that is chapter 1 of our book. Chapter 2 is planning for revenue and success. So a little bit about how to dynamically plan when everything around you is constantly shifting. The buyer's journey shifting, your company is or isn't hitting its revenue targets. Suddenly there's a new product on launch. Or hey, where do you throw in AI, right? Where does that? So your plans need to be more fluid than they used to be. And so chapter 2 really digs into that. There'll be 3 additional chapters focused on how do you engage your ICP? How do you think about new metrics, right, in this kind of new world? And then last but not least, how do you make this happen, right? Hint, and if you're in MOPS, this is either good or bad news, depending on how you look at it. We really, want to lean into the MOPS team to really help make these shifts, as kind of the ones that orchestrate the marketing team to get there. And then as part of chapter 1, we've got 2 great articles from Bob at Align ICP to really, one, dig in a little deeper to that ICP segmentation maturity. And then secondly, the rethinking go-to-market metrics, and really thinking about how, as marketers, we should really be speaking finance in order to make sure that we're getting the budget we need and can justify the budget we need for our activities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our questions so far and get our panelists talking again. Enough of me, more of you. They came here to see you guys. All right. So our first question we have is, so how long does this process of developing an ICP take? Right? We talked a lot about it. I just mentioned that there's some effort involved, right? So approximately how long does it take? So Bob, why don't you kick us off there? And then I think Kelly, you might have some good kind of, hey, here's how long it took us sort of kind of feedback as well.
That's such a great question, and a very loaded one as well, because it really depends on the maturity of the organization, as well as the resources that are queued up on the front end, who are kind of bought in and invested in the process. So I think about the fastest humanly possible would be about 6 weeks. I think more typical is probably 3 or 4 months. There's data wrangling that needs to happen. You need to get access to that, coveted resource, that Salesforce admin, because you need to extract the data from the CRM. You need to make sure you've got the revenue data as well available in a format that can be used, as well as surfacing attributes. So I think about that range, anywhere from 6 weeks to 3, 4, 5 months, depending on resource focus. It could even go longer, depending on the organization. Kelly, you've got some thoughts about your recent experiences?
Yeah, so at Intelex, I would say it probably took about 2 months from first kind of group phone call through creation of the ICP cards, which I think is pretty good. Probably a little bit of time, operationalizing it and whatnot. But what I really want to point out too, and this relates to Bob, I think it was perhaps your slide, maybe Kathy's, but it was the pitfalls. Things, Kathy, it was yours. It was the ones that you could fall into. And I think if you don't have good partners, if you don't have Inverta, if you don't have Align ICP to guide you on this process, and if you're attending this webinar, it's probably because you don't really know where to start or you don't know what some of the challenges could be. That's where you can really get stuck on certain things. And so having the two teams to guide us and say, okay, we're going to have a series of meetings. We're going to cover these different things. Here's the access we need. Here's how we connect to your CRM. If we did this on our own, we definitely would have fallen into many more of those pitfalls that were noted. And so the benefit is saying, I was looking at that slide and I'm like, no, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. That didn't happen. And it was great because that can really add time, frustration across different teams, and just kind of stress into the whole process. So I would say, yeah, it was probably about 2 months. If you're working with a partner, that seems about like a right time frame. If you're doing it on your own, it could be a little bit longer and you could fall into some of those pitfalls as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. All right. So the next question, I'm gonna anonymize here a little bit because I feel like, and Kathy will agree with me, every client we work with says this to us, which is, my data is a mess. So now what? How do I do this when my data is a mess? So Kathy, why don't you kick us?
Everyone's data is a mess. I've never heard anyone say we have great data. It's perfect. And I think it always will be, because there's so many reasons why data is a mess. There's so many reasons. One of the reasons we tried a couple of the online solutions, to be honest, and it was working off bad data. So it gave the output was, I thought, compromised. When we started working with Line ICP, what I really like is they take your data off. They don't try to fix your whole data governance, data master management. Like, that's not going to happen. That's a huge project. They take it, they'll normalize it, standardize it, so we can do the analysis on that. Then they push the results back in. And I think that's the best way to handle it. And if you look outside this is beyond ICP. For any AI driven thing or machine learning, you're going to have to find a way to get around your data. And that's one way we are really pursuing right now, is we can just take it, normalize it, standardize it, get the answers you need, and then put the outcomes back into your system. Bob, Kelly, anything you want to add? I mean, I've never heard anyone say we have perfect data.
I dream of perfect data, but no, we don't have perfect data either. And so I think you work with what you have, and that's also where the art comes into play too, is your data only tells so much of the story. You also want to make sure you have that feedback from your stakeholders in the process as well, and you marry the two to then push out your ICP.
Yeah.
I think building on that, once you have the data in a structure and format to do analysis, it just opens a door to a lot of different types of work. So with some other clients, we're actually doing some white space analysis. We're doing some SKU level analysis for expansion opportunities. So it just, once you have the data normalized and the taxonomy, created, and you've started to apply financial metrics, it just really opens the door to a lot of different possibilities that are just not possible in your CRM today.
And Bob, with that, because we've worked on a couple of those projects a little beyond ICP, like you say, the white space, we've done territory plan, SKU, because you're pulling data from multiple systems, a lot of times the finance system, what has been really nice is going back and really tying off them before you do the analysis. Finance, so these metrics make sense with how you report to the board, like getting all that buy-in also to be sure before you start the data that you have that all in good shape. And that has made a big difference. And I appreciate it.
That's one of the things that excites me most about this process, is just having, worked as a marketer in many different software companies, just oftentimes the tension between finance and marketing. This really helps build a bridge and a lot of trust and confidence in terms of, intentionality of spend and, board level support of marketing, starting to reinvest in brand building. So I just think it opens up a lot of trust and confidence in terms of the overall go-to-market motion, and really empowering, marketing leaders like Kelly to really be in the driver's seat to help enable that.
Awesome. All right. So our third and final question, I think this one I'm gonna kick it to you, Kelly, to get us kicked off with this conversation. But obviously we talked about the ICP providing focus, right? And kind of limiting who we really want to spend our time, money, and effort on to actually sell to. But that being said, does this mean that you say no to all non-ICP prospects that come in the door moving forward? How have you guys handled that at Intelex? Because I'm sure and I think you mentioned that your sales team asked that question. So how did you guys handle that?
Yes, it's a great question. We wanted to make sure that we were focusing our marketing efforts, especially at first, specifically on our ICP. Test it, bring it in, understand, are they truly converting faster, right? Are they giving higher ACV and higher sales value to us? So there is some testing to work out on the marketing side. You can be opportunistic, right? You still have to bring in your business and hit your quotas and things that you need to hit each quarter. But what we really wanted to reiterate is it's where you focus your energy and your efforts. Your target account list should be aligned to our ICP. There was a slide that was shown as well that said 70% of your wins should be in ICP. So trending towards that number and measuring all of the different facets to get to that number over time is super, super important. So it's not saying no per se, but it's really looking at either opportunities that are coming in or leads that are coming in. Is this a good use of my energy? Is this going to bring the lifetime value? Do I need to focus my energy somewhere else? So, and I think that's all part of that ICP journey is you can't flip a switch and say, nope, we're not doing anything else. It's just ICP. That's ultimately where we want to go, but we also have to balance the needs of the business. So it's a slow process, but no, you don't have to say no, but you do have to ask, is this a good focus for my energy?
Yeah. That being said, though, if you do the ICP building exercise appropriately, you may in fact find that there is a class of accounts that you absolutely do want to say no to. It's not saying no to every class of ICP, but you might identify the like anti-ICP, which
That's
are those
exactly
accounts that are just going to be a failure for you, cost your company money, and it's just not worth it.
For sure. And actually, and that was part of the output too from Align ICP is accounts were scored based on how well they would fit as a customer of Intelex. And so we prioritize based on that score. So if it's higher, great. If not, we tend to stay away. So that's exactly right. And I think defining like the true anti is important because they're just not only are they not going to bring what you want, but they actually are probably very detrimental to your business.
They're not going to bring you joy at the end of the day.
No joy.
No joy.
Thank you, Maria Kondo of ICP.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There you go.
Awesome. All right. Well, that was our last question for today. So I want to thank our panelists again for all joining us today. Great conversation. Really appreciate it. Want to thank all of our attendees. As I mentioned, you guys will get the recording after today's session. So check your inboxes tomorrow morning. Feel free to share that liberally with your friends and colleagues. And thank you all for joining. And thank you and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so very much.
Thanks, Jess.